Good Sunday morning and welcome to WGN-TV Political Report. I'm Paul Lisnick. This morning we're taking you inside the race for Illinois' new 8th Congressional District. Democrat Raja Krishnamoorthi has held the seat for the last 3 terms and is asking voters to send him back to Washington this November. The redrawn district covers parts of the northwestern suburbs from Rosemont to Schaumburg out to Elgin. Incumbent Krishnamoorthi is facing a challenge from businessman and retired Navy officer Chris Dargis. For now, incumbent Congressman and Democrat Raja Krishnamoorthi joins me this morning to talk about his bid for another term. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, thanks so much, Paul.
So let's start with issues. Let's start with inflation. You've identified 4 factors that explain things. Briefly, government spending on prescription drugs, supply chain disruptions, Russia's war against Ukraine, profiteering by corporations. Most people probably support prescription drugs and the controls that have passed there, but many say the Inflation Reduction Act has unnecessary spending in it. Does it?
No. Inflation Reduction Act does a few things. One is it lowers prescription drug prices. It lowers energy costs, lowers costs of joining Obamacare, and it lowers the deficit and debt upwards of $1 trillion over the next decade or so. And so really what it does is what Hank Paulson, a Republican Treasury Secretary, did, which is fight inflation. And that's why he, among others, have advocated for it. It got signed into law. And I tell you, seniors are very, very excited about lower prescription drug prices coming up in January.
Right or wrong, people feel inflation when they're at the gas pump, when they're in the store. And many in Congress and the Democrat side have basically been saying gas prices are up because of Putin's war on Ukraine. But my sense is that people that might have worked several months ago, people aren't buying that anymore. I mean, do you think, is that still a factor, or is it time to move beyond that issue?
I think it's a factor, but there's other factors. So one is there's a lack of global refining capacity. For any amount of crude oil that's produced, there's not enough refineries and refining capacity to turn that crude oil into gasoline. Currently, there's a 3 million barrel per day global refinery shortage. And in the United States, there's a 1 million barrel per day shortage as well. So what we need to do is invoke the Defense Production Act to increase that refining capacity ASAP. If we can do that, and that's a bipartisan initiative, by the way, that I'm leading. If we can do that, then we can turn any amount of crude oil that we produce in the United States into more gasoline, which means lower prices at the pump.
What do you say to Republicans who say this is all because President Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline?
That doesn't make any sense. There's no shortage of pipeline capacity. What there is that there's a shortage of refining capacity, and global production has reduced because of the Ukraine war and Russian crude not coming onto the market as much as before.
Let me shift to guns and violence. Obviously, the Highland Park situation, tragedy that happened, is a concern on everybody's mind. I know you support a ban on assault weapons, a 3-day waiting period for all handgun sales. How do you win over Republicans and Democrats who look at those restrictions and say you're invading my Second Amendment rights?
So I'm from Peoria, Illinois, and there was a culture of sportsmanship and hunting and so forth. So I respect the Second Amendment. However, what we saw in Highland Park was not a proper use of Second Amendment rights. That was a man taking an AR-15 style weapon and using it off a rooftop to kill and maim dozens of people. We have to do what it takes to prevent that type of tragedy from happening again. For the efforts that I have undertaken in Congress, including pursuing a universal background check bill, banning high-capacity magazines, putting a 3-day waiting period for the purchase of handguns, I earned an F rating from the NRA. My opponent earned an A rating for opposing all those measures. And by the way, those are majority positions held in the Chicago area and indeed in the nation. The universal background check bill is supported by 90% of gun owners, Paul. I'm not talking about people who don't own guns, and most of them are folks that want their Second Amendment rights to be protected, but they want to protect human lives at the same time.
And many Republicans would say, look, it's not about the guns, mental health issues, it's those things.
Certainly mental health is an issue. And that's why the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that we passed and got signed into law is investing more into the mental health problems that beset our communities. But when you have, whether they are mentally stable or unstable folks with easier access to weapons of war, such as a M&P-15 weapon, which is a military and police weapon that Mr. Cremo had accessed in the Highland Park shooting, only bad things happen.
On the abortion issue, I know you were not supportive of the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, but you've also talked about your respect for the settled law precedents. The court did too. The question is, even on issues like that where many people aren't happy about it, but do we simply have to respect that the court has ruled and that's the day, that's what it is now?
No. I think that what we have to do is we have to codify Roe v. Wade in Congress. And that's what I tried to do. In addition to that, though, Paul, not only did the Supreme Court overturn Roe v. Wade, but has now set in motion the possibility of overturning precedent that supports a right to contraception, right to equal marriage, right to bodily autonomy, and right to privacy. All of those particular progeny of Roe v. Wade as settled precedents are now under attack. So we have to do everything we can to protect those. Unfortunately, my opponent actually earned the highest rating from the Illinois Right to Life organization because he opposes Roe v. Wade, and he would ban abortion even in the case of rape and incest, according to the Illinois Right to Life scorecard.
And he'll have his chance to express his views later in the show. Do you think Congress needs to act proactively before the Supreme? Because you're right, these issues are coming before the Supreme Court this term, certainly affirmative action. Should Congress be acting now or wait until the court acts?
No, act right now. In fact, not only did we act, but we took a vote on it in the House. All of those particular bills protecting those rights to bodily autonomy, right to contraception, and so forth passed against the wishes of dozens and dozens of Republicans who voted against those particular measures.
Regarding the war in Ukraine, Kevin McCarthy, if he becomes Speaker of the House, said to Washington Post, the Republican Congress could essentially cut off the aid to Ukraine. What's your thoughts if that happens?
I think that's crazy. The Ukrainians are fighting valiantly and brilliantly in the field, thanks to our support. And now for Leader McCarthy, I should say, to say that if he became Speaker, he would support somehow cutting off that aid, I think would be cutting the Ukrainians off at the knees. The Ukrainians are fighting a war so that we don't have to, Paul.
On the immigration issue, as you know, Texas, Florida, they're sending migrants to many blue cities, including our very own Chicago. But there's an argument to be made that, if you're a border state, you shouldn't have to deal with this on your own. So what is your suggestion of policy regarding not only securing the border, but doesn't the responsibility of handling the migrants have to be shared?
I think this is a shared responsibility. I'm an immigrant myself. I'm one of the few naturalized citizens in Congress. And what I believe that this recent border crisis reveals is two things. We have a broken border and we have a broken legal immigration system. With regard to the border, I am very interested in bipartisan work, including in legislation that Senator Cornyn of Texas, a Republican, is pursuing to surge resources to the border, not only Customs and Border Patrol personnel, but also technology and immigration court judges and personnel to adjudicate the asylum claims that are being brought forward. Another colleague of mine, Vicente Gonzalez, a Democrat on the border in Texas, has said that maybe we should set up asylum safety zones in Central America so people don't, get manipulated by the cartels and travel all the way through Mexico to then lodge their asylum claims here. I like those ideas, but one thing we have to admit is our legal immigration system is completely messed up. People who want to legally apply to live or work here face bureaucratic hurdles which really are unfair and, most importantly, penalize the American economy because we can't get the fruits of their labor. I think that we have to comprehensively solve this problem.
Illinois 8th Congressional District Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, thanks for being with me and the Democratic nominee. Have a good Sunday and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Paul.
Coming up next on WGN-TV Political Report, Republican challenger Chris Dargus joins me. More on his campaign for Congress when we come back. Stay with us.